Revenge with Karen.
I knew the exact moment the evening went from standard corporate purgatory to my villain origin story. It wasn't when the CEO, Richard, spilled a 20-year-old scotch on a rug that cost more than my parents' house. And it wasn't when the marketing VP tried to snort something off his cufflink in the bathroom line. It was the coat. Always the coat. I was standing near the shrimp tower, trying to blend into the beige wallpaper, nursing a club soda that had lost its fizz about an hour ago. I'm Amanda. I'm 45, I drive a Honda that sounds like a lawnmower with asthma, and I've been the senior financial analyst at Viridian Dynamics for 12 years. That's a fancy way of saying I'm the janitor for their money. I clean up the messes the big boys make when they play poker with the company credit card. I'm the invisible woman. I wear gray. I speak only when spoken to. I exist in the spreadsheets, in the room. But tonight was the annual We Made a Profit Despite Our Best Efforts gala. Mandatory attendance. By the way, if you're into stories about invisible people dismantling empires brick by brick, do me a solid and smash subscribe. It keeps the lights on and the caffeine flowing. Thanks. Enter Tessa, Richard's wife. Tessa looks like she was 3D printed by an algorithm that only understands botox and malice. She's 20 years younger than Richard, with skin pulled so tight that if she sneezed, her ankles would snap. She swept into the room wearing a dress that was less garment and more cry for attention, trailing a scent of expensive perfume and moral bankruptcy. She spotted me. It's rare, like spotting a snow leopard, but less majestic and more depressing. She zeroed in on me because she needed a punching bag to warm up her knuckles before moving on to the board members' wives. She sashayed over, entourage of sycophants giggling in her wake. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my coat. It was draped over my arm because the coat check was full. It's a wool trench, charcoal, practical. I bought it at a thrift store in the state 5 years ago for $12. It's got a loose button and smells faintly of old books. I love it. Oh, Amanda, she cooed, her voice loud enough to cut through the jazz band's saxophone solo. You're still wearing that, I swear. I saw you in that thing at the Christmas party. 3 years ago. The room quieted down. It's amazing how silence spreads when rich people smell blood in the water. It's durable, I said, keeping my voice flat. My pulse didn't even jump. I've been insulted by experts. She was an amateur. It's quaint, Tessa laughed, a sound like glass breaking in a dishwasher. Are things tight at home, Han? Is that why you haven't upgraded? Saving up for new one. She leaned in, smiling that shark smile, waiting for me to crumble. She wanted me to stammer, to blush, to apologize for my existence. That's the currency these people trade in, humiliation. But she didn't know what was in my pocket. She didn't know that earlier that morning, I'd finalized a leverage report that showed her husband's visionary acquisition of a fintech startup was actually a hemorrhaging artery of debt that was about to turn this company into a smoking crater. He didn't know that I had spent the last decade buying Class B non-voting shares every time the stock dipped because Richard got caught with an escort or tweeted something racist. I looked her dead in the eye. I didn't blink. I let the silence hang there until it got awkward, until her smile started to twitch at the corners. No, Tessa, I said, my voice carrying just enough to reach the CFO standing 3 feet away. I'm not saving up for coat. I'm saving up to buy this company. For a second, nobody moved. It was like I'd just pulled a grenade pin and set it on the hors d'oeuvres table. Then Tessa laughed. It was a loud, desperate bray. Oh, that's rich. Did you hear that, Richard? The calculator thinks she's a capitalist. Oh, Amanda, you're adorable. Never change. She rolled her eyes, patted my arm with a hand that felt like a cold, dead fish, and turned away, dragging her audience with her. They laughed too, because that's what you do when the queen bee laughs. You laugh so you don't get stung. I watched her walk away. I watched Richard refill his glass, his hand shaking slightly, a tremor I'd noticed in the last 3 board meetings. I watched the VP of sales checking his phone, sweating, probably reading the same internal memo I drafted 3 hours ago about the Q3 projections being a total fabrication. They thought it was a joke. They thought I was the office furniture making a squeak. I put my coat on. I buttoned it up all the way to the chin. It felt like armor. I walked out of the gala, past the valets parking Ferraris and Teslas, and got into my Honda. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles were white, not from fear, from anticipation. I reached into the glove box and pulled out a burner phone. I had one number saved in it, number belonging to a man named Elias Vance. the ousted co-founder who Richard had stabbed in the back 7 years ago. Elias still held the dead voting block, shares that were considered worthless because they had no dividend yield. But they had one thing: they had boardroom access, rights in the event of a financial crisis. And I was about to manufacture a crisis that would make the Great Depression look like a bounce in the market. "Game on, Tessa," I whispered to the empty car. "I hope you kept the receipt for that dress." The next morning, the office was buzzing with the kind of frantic energy you usually see in an anthill right after a kid kicks it. I walked in at 7:55 a.m., same as always. I scanned my badge. The beep was the only greeting I got, and headed to my cubicle in the back corner of the finance floor. They call it the silo. It's where they put the people who actually do the work, so the executives don't have to look at us while they practice their putting on the office green. My desk is a fortress of paper stacks, 3 monitors, and a half-dead succulent named Asset. I sat down, fired up the terminal, and took a sip of my lukewarm Bodega coffee. It tasted like burnt hazelnuts and regret. Perfect. While the rest of the floor was gossiping about Tessa's dress or Richard's speech, opened a hidden partition on my hard drive. To IT, this folder looked like archived tax records from 2014. Boring, dense, untouchable. To me, it was the war room. I clicked open a spreadsheet titled Project Guillotine. I've been building this for 12 years. 12 years of being the person they handed the boring files to. "Here, Amanda, look through these expense reports. Amanda, double-check these merger clauses. Amanda, organize the basement archives." Thought they were giving me grunt work. What they were actually giving me was the skeleton key to the castle. I knew everything. I knew that the VP of Operations was funneling supply chain kickbacks through a shell company in Delaware. I knew the CFO was cooking the books to hide the fact that our flagship product, the very cloud software, was actually just a reskinned version of a competitor's code that we were about to get sued for. I knew that Richard, glorious CEO, had leveraged his personal shares to pay off a gambling debt in Macau. But knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is just potential energy. Power is knowing when to pull the trigger. I tabbed over to the market watch. Viridian Dynamics, VRD, was trading at $45.20. "Not for long," I muttered. I opened the internal comms channel. I could see the panic starting to bubble up in the private executive chats. I had access to those too, not because I was a hacker, but because the executive assistant, a sweet girl named Sarah who Richard screamed at daily, had given me her password 3 years ago so I could help her format a PDF. She never changed it. Why would she? I was just Amanda. Amanda helps. Amanda fixes things. Chat log, CFO to CEO CFO. "Richard, the leaks about the acquisition fail are hitting the blogs. Seeking Alpha just posted a rumor piece. CEO, kill it, tell them it's baseless. Buy ads if you have to. CFO, we don't have the cash flow for Media Blitz, Richard. The bank lines are tapped." I smiled. The rumor piece on Seeking Alpha, I wrote that. Well, I didn't write it. I provided the raw data to a freelancer who needed a scoop. Anonymous source, untraceable. The stock ticked down, $44.80. I picked up my phone, a real phone this time, and texted my broker. "Buy 500 more on the dip. Execute at $44. Amanda," I snapped my head up. It was Chad, the junior analyst. Chad is 24, wears suits that are too blue, and thinks crypto is a personality trait. "Yeah, Chad. Hey, Richard's looking for the Q3 risk assessment files. The ones for the fintech merger. He's screaming about them being missing from the shared drive." "They aren't missing," I said, typing away without looking at him. "They're in the archive folder, subdirectory liabilities, under D for disaster." Chad blinked, his mouth open like a confused koi fish. Okay, thanks, you're weird, Amanda." "I'm efficient, Chad, go." He ran off. I watched him go. These kids, they come and go. They see the job as a stepping stone. I saw it as a siege. I went back to my screen. The stock was at $44.50. I checked my personal portfolio. It wasn't just stocks. Over the years, I'd bought debt. I'd bought favors. I remembered the time the head of legal needed a DUI to disappear from the public record. I knew a guy who knew a clerk. It went away. The head of legal owed me. I remembered when the HR director was about to be fired for compliance oversight. I fixed the paperwork retroactively, saving her pension. She owed me. I wasn't just a weird lady in a trench coat. It was the spider in the center of a web that covered the entire building. And Tessa? Tessa had just walked into the parlor and insulted the spider. My burner phone buzzed in my purse. A text message. 4 p.m., the place with the bad scones. It was Elias Vance, the exiled founder. I closed my spreadsheets. I took another sip of my terrible coffee. It tasted a little sweeter now. The first domino had already fallen. They just hadn't heard the click yet. Tea shop was a relic, much like Elias Vance himself. It smelled of lavender and dust, located in a part of the city that gentrification had sniffed at and decided to skip. It was perfect. No polished executives came here. No one who knew what EBITDA meant would be caught dead eating these scones. Elias was sitting in the back booth, looking like a wizard who had traded his robes for a tweed jacket. He was 70, with wild white hair and eyes that were sharp, angry, surprisingly clear. He was reading a newspaper, an actual physical newspaper. I slid into the booth opposite him. I didn't take off my coat. "Amanda," he grunted, not looking up. "You look tired. You look like you've been carrying a mountain." "Just accompany Elias," I said, signaling the waitress for black tea. "How's retirement?" "Boring. Golf is a waste of a good walk. And my grandkids only call when they need money." He folded the paper and looked at me. "Are we here? You haven't reached out in 5 years. Last time you did, you saved me from a tax audit that would have stripped me bare." "I did," I acknowledged. "You owe me for that." "I know I do. Is that what this is? Cashing in a chip?" "I'm not cashing in," I said, leaning forward, lowering my voice. "I'm doubling down." I pulled a manila folder from my bag and slid it across the sticky table. Elias opened it. His eyes scanned the pages, internal memos, watched acquisition data, the leverage reports, and the photos of Richard's offshore bank statements. His eyebrows shot up. "Jesus, Amanda, this is a death certificate. It's a foreclosure notice," I corrected. "Richard has run Viridian into the ground. He stripped the assets, bloated the debt, and alienated the talent. The stock is going to tank, Elias. It's going to hit single digits within the month." Elias snorted. "Good, let it burn." "I hope he chokes on the ashes." "No," I said sharply. "We don't let it burn, we let him burn. The company has good bones, Elias. The staff, the real staff, the ones in the silo, the engineers, the support team, they're good. They don't deserve to lose their livelihoods because Richard wants to buy another yacht." Elias looked at me, really looked at me. "So, what's the play? You want me to join a class action? I want your shares." He laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "My shares? They're useless, Amanda. Class C founder's stock. No voting rights unless the company misses 3 consecutive quarters of dividend payments, which Richard ensures never happens by borrowing money to pay the dividends." "Look at page 4, I said. He flipped the page. He stopped. He read it again. He missed the payment to the preferred trust. He missed it yesterday, I said. He was too busy buying Tessa a diamond necklace for the gala. Authorized the transfer from the operational account, but the bank flagged it because of the liquidity crunch. The dividend payment bounced, Elias. Technically, as of midnight last night, the Class C restrictions are lifted. Your shares have voting power again." Elias stared at the paper. His hands started to tremble. "Does he know?" "No, the notification went to his old email address, the one he never checks, the one I still monitor." A slow, terrifying grin spread across Elias's face. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting in the dark with a knife for 7 years. "How much?" he asked. "I don't have millions, Elias. You know my salary, but I have my savings, my 401k, my house. I can give you fair market value as of yesterday's close. You want to buy me out? No. I want you to proxy them to me. I want you to give me the gun so I can shoot him." Elias sat back, looked out the window at the gray street. "You're risking everything, Amanda. If this fails, he'll fire you. He'll blacklist you. You'll never work in finance again. I'm 45, Elias. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment and my boss's wife asked me if I was saving up for a coat. I don't have a life to lose. I have a job to finish." He looked back at me. The anger in his eyes softened into something like respect. "You're not the enemy, are you?" he murmured. "I'm the reset," I said, reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a fountain pen. He signed the proxy document at the bottom of the page. He didn't even hesitate. "Take it," he said, sliding the folder back. "Take it all. But promise me one thing." "What?" "When you fire him, tell him it was me who sharpened the axe." "I'll do better than that," I said, tucking the folder into my coat, my armor. "I'll let you swing it." I left the tea shop. The wind was picking up outside, cold and biting. It felt good. Step 1 was complete. I had the voting block, but I didn't have the majority yet. I needed more. I needed the board to turn on him, and for that I needed pressure. I needed the kind of pressure that cracks diamonds. I took out my phone and called the freelance journalist again. It's me, I said. Run the second story. The one about the sexual harassment settlements. Yeah, release the names. I hung up. The storm wasn't coming. It was the storm. By Wednesday, the atmosphere at Viridian Dynamics was less corporate office and more bunker during an air raid. The second article had dropped at 6 a.m. Toxic culture and hush money inside the executive suite of Viridian. It was brutal. It detailed 3 separate settlements Richard had paid out using company slush funds. It didn't name the victims, I made sure of that, but it named the dates, the amounts, the specific accounts the money came from. The stock opened at $38.00 and plummeted to $32.50 by lunch. I was in the break room, microwaving a soup that smelled like sodium and sadness, when Tessa stormed in. She wasn't supposed to be here. She usually only came in to redecorate Richard's office or yell at the interns. But today, she looked rattled. Her hair was slightly less perfect, eyes wild behind oversized sunglasses. She spotted me. Of course she did. You, she snapped, marching over. Do you know how to work the shredder? I paused the microwave. I have a PhD in shredding, Tessa. What do you need? Richard's office. Now there are boxes, old files, they need to go. The lawyers are coming tomorrow for some audit. That sounds like spoliation of evidence, I said calmly, stirring my soup. I don't care what it sounds like, she shrieked, her voice cracking. Just do it. God, why is everyone so incompetent? Richard is trying to save this company from these liars in the press, and you people are just standing around eating soup. I'm on my lunch break, Tessa. I don't care. Get up there, she stormed out. I smiled. They were panicking. They were making mistakes. I went up to the executive floor. It was chaos. Assistants were crying. VPs were shouting into phones. Richard's door was closed, but I could hear him screaming. I went into the copy room adjacent to his office. Tessa had pointed to a stack of bankers' boxes marked 2018 to 2020 MISC. Shred these, she had said. I opened the first box. It wasn't just MISC. It was the hard copies of the offshore transaction logs, the ones they thought they had deleted from the servers. They were stupid. They were so arrogant they kept physical trophies of their crimes. I didn't shred them. I wheeled the cart of boxes down the hall, past the panic, past the shouting. Where are you taking those? Richard's secretary, Brenda, asked. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Tessa wants them in the basement incinerator room, I lied smoothly. Security protocol. Brenda nodded, too tired to care. Okay, just get them out of here. I took the elevator down, but not to the basement. I went to the parking garage, loaded 6 boxes of incriminating evidence into the back of my Honda Civic. I covered them with a gym blanket. Then I went back upstairs, grabbed a stack of blank paper from the supply closet, and spent the next hour feeding it into the shredder while checking my phone. Stock alert, VRD trading at $29.00. The pressure was working, but I needed an alliance. I had Elias, and I had the evidence, but I needed a current insider, someone on the board who was wavering. I knew who it was. Marcus Thorne, the only board member who actually read the reports I wrote. He was a decent man, a former engineer who hated the flash of Richard's leadership. He had been sidelined lately, outvoted by Richard's cronies. I knew Marcus took his coffee on the roof terrace at 2 p.m., a smoker's habit he tried to hide from his cardiologist. I went up to the roof. It was windy. The city looked gray and sprawling below us. Marcus was there, leaning against the railing, smoking a parliament. He looked grim. Nice coat, he said, not turning around. He recognized the sound of my footsteps, or maybe just the smell of cheap wool. It's warm, I said, joining him at the railing. Rough day, rough decade, he sighed. Exhale smoke. You see the numbers, Amanda. You know we're bleeding out. I know, I'm thinking of resigning, he admitted, before the ship goes under. Save whatever reputation I have left. Don't, I said. He turned to look at me. Why should I stay? Richard is the captain and he's drunk at the wheel. Because there's a mutiny coming, Marcus, I said softly. And we need a new captain. He frowned. Mutiny? Who? You? He chuckled, but it wasn't mean like Tessa's. It was just incredulous. Amanda, you're the best analyst we have, but your support staff. I own 4% of the company personally, I said. It's widened. And as of yesterday, I continued, I hold the proxy for Elias Vance's 12% block. He dropped his cigarette. Elias, he gave you his proxy. And I have the boxes, Marcus, I said, driving the final nail in. The ones Tessa told me to shred. The ones that prove the fraud. I have them in my trunk. Marcus stared at me. He looked at my face, my cheap coat, my calm hands. He saw the steel underneath. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice low. "I want to call a vote of no confidence." "Emergency board meeting. Friday, you can't call it. You're not on the board." "No," I said, "but you are, you call it. I'll provide the ammunition." He looked back out at the skyline. He took a long breath of fresh air as if tasting freedom for the first time in years. "Friday," he said, "if I do this, if we miss, he'll kill us." "He's already dead, Marcus," I said. "He just doesn't know he's walking around." Marcus nodded. "Okay. I'll send the notice at 5 p.m. I walked back to the elevator. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. But my face was stone. I was going to take them all down, and I was going to do it wearing a $12 coat. Thursday was a tightrope walk over a pit of vipers. Marcus had sent the notice for the emergency board meeting. The subject line was simply, "Review of Leadership and Strategic Direction. Corporate speak for prepare the firing squad." Richard went nuclear. I could hear him from the elevator lobby. He was screaming at Marcus over the phone, his voice echoing down the marble corridors. "You traitorous hack. I made you. You think you can oust me? I own this board." I slipped into my cubicle, keeping my head down. I needed to lay low. I had the proxy. I had the evidence. But if they caught wind of me being the architect, find a way to stop me before the meeting. They'd lock me out of the building, fire me for cause, sue me into oblivion. I was safe. I was invisible. Until 10:30 a.m. A shadow fell over my desk. I looked up. It was Stephen, the company's general counsel. Stephen was a shark in a three-piece suit. He was Richard's fixer. He knew where the bodies were buried because he usually dug the holes. "Amanda," he said, his voice silky and cold. "Got a minute?" Stomach dropped to my shoes. "Sure, Stephen, what's up?" He sat on the edge of my desk, invading my space. He picked up my stapler, examining it like a murder weapon. "We've been auditing the server logs," he said casually, "trying to find the source of the leaks to the press." "Makes sense," I said, typing a nonsense formula into Excel just to keep my hands moving. "We found some interesting traffic coming from this terminal," he said. "Large data transfers, encrypted files, archives being accessed that haven't been touched in years." I stopped typing. "I'm doing a historical audit for the Q3 reconcile," I said. "Richard asked for it." "Did he?" Stephen smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Because I asked Richard and he said he didn't ask you for shit." The air in the cubicle went thin. "Maybe I misunderstood," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "I can show you the work orders. Cut the crap, Amanda," he hissed, leaning in. "I know you're up to something. I saw you talking to Marcus on the roof. I saw you leave with those boxes yesterday. You think because you dress like a librarian I don't see you." He stood up, towering over me. "I'm going to have security search your car, Amanda. Right now. And if I find one piece of company property in that Honda, I'm going to have you arrested for corporate espionage. You'll go to prison. Do you understand? Prison." He turned to walk away. "Leave the building." I sat there, frozen. The boxes. The boxes were in my trunk. If he found them, it was over. Game over, life over. I had maybe 5 minutes before security got to the garage. I grabbed my bag. I stood up. I didn't run. Running looks guilty. I walked, fast. I headed for the stairwell. I skipped the elevator. I ran down 6 flights of stairs, my heels clicking like gunshots on the concrete. I burst into the garage. Could hear the security golf cart whining in the distance. I got to my car. I fumbled with keys. I popped the trunk. I needed to move the boxes. But where? There was a cleaning van parked next to me. Jim's janitorial. I knew Jim. He was a nice guy. I'd helped him fix his payroll deduction last year when HR screwed it up. The back of his van was open. He was nowhere to be seen, probably on break. I grabbed the boxes, 2 at a time, threw them into the back of Jim's van, burying them under a pile of dirty mop heads and trash bags. 1 box, 2 boxes. The security cart was getting louder. I could see the flashing lights reflecting off the walls. 3, 4, I was sweating. My hands were shaking. 5, 6. I slammed the van doors shut just as the security cart rounded the corner. I leaned against my car, gasping for air, pretending to look for my phone. 2 security guards jumped out. Stephen was with them. "Open it," Stephen barked. I popped the trunk. It was empty. Just a spare tire, a jumper cable, and a stray Lululemon receipt. Stephen stared at the empty trunk. His face turned purple. "Where are they?" he screamed. "I know you took them." "Took what, Stephen?" I asked, my voice finally steadying. "My gym clothes." He kicked my tire. "You're playing a dangerous game, Amanda. Watch your back." He stormed off. The guards followed, looking confused. I waited until they were gone. Then I slumped against the car and slid down to the concrete floor. I buried my face in my hands. That was too close. I texted Jim, "Hey Jim, I left some personal boxes in your van by accident. Can you keep them safe at your place tonight? I'll pick them up tomorrow. $500 in it for you." He replied instantly, "No prob, Amanda. You saved my tax return. I got you." I closed my eyes. We were still in the game. Now they knew I was a player. Tonight I had to send the letter, the one to the board chair, the ultimatum. I went back upstairs. I didn't go to my desk. I went to the mailroom. I dropped a sealed envelope into the outgoing executive mail slot. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "If you want to save the company, vote with Marcus tomorrow. If you don't, the contents of the missing boxes will be sent to the SEC, the FBI, the New York Times on Monday morning. Your choice." I didn't sign it. I didn't have to. Tomorrow was the day, win or die, Friday morning, the day of the reckoning. The boardroom was a glass-walled aquarium of tension. I wasn't invited, obviously. I was just the analyst. But the entire company had ground to a halt. Nobody was working. Everyone was refreshing their email, waiting for the blast radius. I sat at my desk, staring at the succulent. "It's just us, Asset," I whispered. Upstairs, the battle was raging. I had a live audio feed. Remember the fix I did for the conference room AV system last month? When the microphones kept cutting out, I fixed it. And while I was there, I patched the audio output to a private IP address. I put on my headphones. "This is preposterous." Richard was yelling, "You have no grounds. The company is in a transition period. The stock is at $22. Richard, Marcus's voice was calm, steady. "We've lost 40% of our value in a week. The creditors are calling the loans. Because of these leaks." Tessa was there too. Of course she was. "Someone is sabotaging us. It's probably that little bitch from finance." I smiled. She remembered me. "We're not here to discuss leaks," the board chair, a man named Sterling, said. His voice was heavy. He had received my letter. "We're here to discuss the motion of no confidence." "You can't do this," Richard hissed. "I control the voting block. Between my shares and the founder's Class C shares held by the trust, I have 51%. You can vote all you want, but I have the veto." This was it, the trap. "Actually," Marcus said, "the Class C shares aren't in the trust anymore." Silence, dead silence. "What are you talking about?" Richard sounded confused. "The dividends were missed," Marcus said. "The shares reverted to Elias Vance on Tuesday." "So what?" Richard laughed nervously. "Elias is a senile old fool. He hates this place. He probably doesn't even know." "He knows," Marcus said, "and he's proxied his voting rights." "To who?" Richard demanded. "To you?" "No," Marcus said, "to the new majority stakeholder." "Who is it?" Tessa shrieked. "Who is doing this?" I took off my headphones. It was time. I stood up. I smoothed down my skirt. I picked up my coat. I put it on. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button for the penthouse floor. Doors opened. The receptionist looked at me. "Amanda, you can't go in there. Watch me," I said. I walked down the hall. The double mahogany doors to the boardroom were closed. I didn't knock. I pushed them open. Every head turned. Richard, Tessa, Marcus, Sterling, the lawyers. Richard looked at me like I was a delivery driver who had walked into the wrong house. "Amanda, what the hell are you doing here? Get out." "We're in a meeting." Tessa stood up, her face twisted in a sneer. "My God, did you come to ask for a raise now? Read the room, honey." I didn't look at them. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table, opposite Richard. I walked over to it. The room was so quiet you could hear the AC humming. I pulled the chair out. I sat down. "You asked who holds the proxy," I said, my voice clear and cold. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the signed document from Elias. I slid it across the polished wood table. It stopped perfectly in front of Sterling. "I do," I said. Richard's face went white. Like sheet of paper white. You're the analyst. You make $60,000 a year, and I invest 40% of it," I said. "Compound interest is a bitch, Richard, and so am I." Tessa gasped. You little rat, you stole this." "I bought it," I corrected. "Legally, fairly. Unlike the yacht you bought with the pension fund." Sterling looked at the document. He looked at me, looked at Richard. "It's valid," Sterling said. "She holds the block. She has the floor." I laced my fingers together on the table. I looked at Richard. "Shall we begin?" The room exploded. Richard slammed his fist on the table. "This is insane. Security, get her out of here." "If you call security," I said calmly, "I will have them escort you out." "I hold 16% of the voting power now, Richard. Marcus holds 4%. The rest of the board holds 31%. That's 51%. We are the majority." Richard looked at the board members. He looked at the men and women he had bullied, ignored, and enriched for years. He looked for loyalty. He found none. They were looking at the stock price on their iPads. They were looking at their own survival. "You can't run a company," Tessa yelled, pointing a manicured finger at me. You're a nobody. You wear a coat from the Salvation Army. You don't know the first thing about leadership. Know that our debt-to-equity ratio is 4:1, I said, reciting the numbers from memory. I know our customer churn rate is 15% month over month. I know that we're burning $2 million a week on consulting fees paid to a firm owned by your brother, Tessa. Tessa's mouth snapped shut. I don't need to be a somebody to read a balance sheet, I said. I just need to be honest. Something this room hasn't seen in a decade. Fine, Richard sneered, trying to regain composure. You have a block, so what? You think you can just take over? You need a vote, a formal vote. That's why we're here, I said. Motion to remove Richard Sterling as CEO effective immediately. For cause, malfeasance, fraud, incompetence. Seconded, Marcus said instantly. All in favor, Sterling asked. Hands went up. Marcus, Sterling, 2 others. Richard counted, that's 4. There are 9 board members, you need 5. He smiled. It was a greasy, terrifying smile. You missed, Amanda. You came at the king and you missed. The other 4 board members, Richard's golf buddies, kept their hands down. Ty, Richard gloated. Status quo remains. Meeting adjourned, and Amanda, you're fired. Get your shit and get out. My heart stopped. I had miscalculated. I thought the fear of the SEC would flip them all. But the cronies were too deep in the mud with him. If he went down, they went down. They were protecting themselves. Wait, voice came from the doorway. We all turned. Standing there was a woman in a black dress. She was old, frail, leaning on a cane, but her eyes were sharp. It was Alina, the widow of the other co-founder, the one who died 10 years ago. She never came to meetings. She was a silent partner. Alina, Richard said, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? I'm here to break the tie, she said. Her voice was thin but steel strong. You haven't voted in 10 years. Richard stammered. I haven't had a reason to, she said. She hobbled into the room. She walked past Richard without looking at him. She walked up to me. She looked at my coat. She smiled. My husband used to wear a coat like that, she said. He said fancy clothes were for people who had nothing to say. She turned to the board. I vote yes, she said. Remove him. Richard collapsed into his chair. It wasn't a sit, it was a fall. Tessa started screaming. No, you can't. This is illegal. I'll sue all of you. Motion carries, Sterling said, banging the gavel. Richard, you are relieved of command effective immediately. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a giant falling. Get out, I said to Richard. He looked at me. His eyes were empty. He stood up, shaky. He took his jacket. He didn't look at Tessa. He just walked out the door. Tessa looked around, realized her power had just walked out the door, and ran after him. Richard, wait. My credit cards? I sat there. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me shaking. So Sterling said, looking at me, we have no CEO, the stock is tanking, the press is outside. What now? Now, I said, taking a deep breath. We go to work. The next hour was a blur. Legal was drafting the press release. HR was processing the termination. Security was escorting Richard and Tessa from the building. I was still sitting in the boardroom. Other board members had left to do damage control. Only Marcus remained. You did it, he said, staring at the empty chair where Richard had sat for 10 years. We did it, I said. So, who's the interim CEO? He asked. Sterling is too old. I'm too technical. We need someone who knows the numbers. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried so we can dig them up and give them a proper burial. He looked at me. No, I said. I'm an analyst, Marcus. I'm not a CEO. You just orchestrated a hostile takeover from a cubicle using a burner phone and a thrift store coat, Marcus said. You're the only CEO we have. The door opened. Sterling came back in. The press is asking for a statement, he said, and the stock just ticked up 5% on the rumor that Richard is out. The market hated him. He looked at me. Marcus is right, Amanda. You hold the proxy. You have the plan. Step up. I looked at my hands. Rough hands, workers' hands. Could I do it? Could I actually lead this place? Or was I just good at burning things down? I thought about the silo. I thought about Chad and Sarah and the engineers who worked late without overtime. I thought about the product that could be great if it wasn't being strangled by greed. I stood up. Okay, I said, but we do it my way. No golden parachutes, no private jets. No galas until we're profitable for real. Sterling nodded, agreed. What's your title? Acting CEO, I said, for now. I walked over to the window. I looked down at the parking lot. I saw Richard's Ferrari peeling out of the lot, Tessa in the passenger seat, probably screaming at him. Good riddance. I turned back to the room. Let's get the department heads in here. We have a company to save. Shall I call a town hall? Marcus asked. Yes, in an hour, everyone, even the janitors. I walked out of the boardroom, headed to my old desk. I needed my notebook. The floor was quiet as I walked through. People were staring. They knew something had happened. I got to my cubicle. Chad was there looking nervous. "Amanda," he said, "is it true? Did Richard get fired?" "Yes," I said, packing up my succulent. "Who's taking over?" I looked at him. I smiled. "I am." Chad's jaw hit the floor. "You? But you're—" "I'm the one who fixed the coolant leak, Chad," I said. "Now I'm going to fix the engine." I took my box. I walked back to the elevator. I pressed the button for the top floor. This time, nobody stopped me. 3 weeks later, the transition hadn't been easy. The stock wobbled. The press was skeptical. Can the mystery analyst save Viridian? But we stabilized. I sold off the private jet. That paid for the severance of the cronies I fired. I renegotiated the debt with the bank. They listened because I showed them the real numbers, not the fantasy ones Richard used. I promoted the engineers who actually built the product and fired the middle managers who just forwarded emails. The culture was shifting. People were leaving at 5 p.m. Laughter was coming back to the break rooms. I was sitting in the CEO's office. I had stripped it. The expensive rugs were gone. The wet bar was gone. It was just a desk, a conference table, and a whiteboard covered in strategy. And my coat was hanging on the coat rack in the corner. My assistant buzzes me. It's Sarah, Richard's old assistant. I gave her a raise and treated her like a human being. She would take a bullet for me now. "Amanda, there's a visitor. She says it's urgent." "Who is it, Tessa?" I paused. "Send her in." The door opened. Tessa walked in. She looked different. The expensive dress was gone, replaced by jeans and a blouse. She looked tired. Her buttocks seemed to be wearing off, letting some actual human expression through. She stood in front of my desk. She didn't sit. "What do you want, Tessa?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop. "Richard left me," she said. Her voice was small. "He took the offshore money and moved to Belize with his yoga instructor. He left me with nothing. The house is in foreclosure. The cards are canceled." "I know," I said. "I canceled them." "I need a job," she said. I finally looked up. "Excuse me, I need a job." She repeated, tears welling up. "I have a degree in marketing. I haven't used it in 10 years, but I can work. I need money, please." I looked at her. The woman who had mocked my coat. The woman who had treated me like furniture. The vindictive part of me wanted to laugh, to tell her to go apply at McDonald's, to crush her like she tried to crush me. But that's what Richard would do. That's what the old Viridian would do. I wasn't Richard. "We have an opening," I said. "Junior marketing associate, entry level. The pay is $45,000 a year." Tessa flinched. That's minimum wage for the city." "It's a start," I said. "You'll report to Chad. He's the new director. You'll do grunt work. You'll fetch coffee. You'll be invisible." She swallowed hard. She looked at the floor. Then she looked at me. "I'll take it." "Good," I said. "Start Monday." "And Tessa?" "Yes. Don't comment on people's coats. You never know who's wearing them." She nodded, shame burning her cheeks, and walked out. I watched her go. I stood up and walked to the coat rack. I touched the rough wool of my trench coat. It wasn't just a coat. It was a reminder of where I came from, of what matters. I put it on. I had a meeting with the investors in an hour. I walked out of the office, past Sarah, past the busy floor of people working together. I smiled. The company was safe. The monster was gone. And the invisible woman, she was finally seen. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.